Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome to episode 7 of Aimbot, the weekly podcast dedicated to discussing all things video games. I'm your host, Kaif Pape, and let's get started for this week. So, I hope you all have had a pretty productive week. It's basically getting to the point that the weekly podcast now will be released at the end of the week. So, between Thursday and Saturday is when you will have your weekly podcast updates. I've done it like that because there will be a lot of announcements throughout the week and or even on the Saturday, on the weekend. So it gives me the best amount of time to gather all the information necessary to give you guys quality podcasts and to talk about whatever is happening in the industry at this point in time. So my week has been really productive actually this week. Outside of the podcast, just in my everyday life and getting some stuff done that I really needed to do over the past couple of months. So I hope you guys had an equally productive or even better than what I had for this week. Now, we're still early on in the year, and similar to the movie industry, game releases and general interest in games and announcements is really slow at this point in time. So between like January and March, April, it's usually the dead period of the movie industry. A lot of lame shows come out at that period of time. You'll barely have anything to go and watch in the cinemas, and the same is true for games. So it's not until like summer or holiday season where you really see the heavy hitters come out. But there are still events that are happening, regardless of how significant they may be, in terms of like announcements and the quality and quantity of games. And this week, our main focus will be on the recent PlayStation State of Play gaming conference. But before we get into that, there's a few stuff that we have to discuss. So in the previous podcast, I was definitely talking about the Switch and how it needed, I thought it needed like an upgrade, regardless of however well it's selling, right? And in this week's weekly Japan sales, the Switch is still number one. So at number one, we have the Switch. And at number two, we have the Switch Lite. At number 3, we have the PS5, that's like the standard edition. And at number 4, we have the PS5 digital edition. And rounding out the number 5 spot of hardware sales, these are hardware sales for this week in Japan, is the PS4. So right behind that, we have the Xbox Series X. So the Series X is not even top 5 hardware sales in Japan. And yes, Sony and Nintendo, they're Japanese companies, but still the PS4 is last gen. And it's outselling the Xbox Series X. So I thought that was a bit hilarious. Again, I'm sure if Microsoft can bring on a lot of Eastern developers, then they can tap into the whole Japanese market a bit more, because that should not be the case. At no point in time should persons still be buying more PS4s than this brand new console, which is out now. And the PS5 is obviously being sold quite well at that. And in terms of shortages, there were recent, like PlayStation did a whole new batch of consoles. So like persons like me, I've still not been able to get one for a lot of different reasons. But the scarcity Sony is attempting to address the whole issue of scarcity by trying to pump out more and more batches of these things, right? So hopefully scalpers don't go too crazy this time around, and more persons out there can get their PlayStation 5s. Now, also in the rumor mill for this week is Switch Pro. So again, with Nintendo news, this Switch, like I said, I feel like it's about time that the Switch gets an upgrade. So do many other persons. And even though Nintendo did not make any mention of it in their Nintendo Direct, it has been brought to many persons' attentions that there's credible rumors out there that the Switch Pro is allegedly coming in this year. So for holiday 2021, we should be seeing a new version of the Switch. This new Switch Pro, it's probably not going to be actually called the Switch Pro, but this new Switch Pro will still have a 720p screen, but it will be able to output up to 4K when docked. So you'll be able to get the home console 4K experience from this upgraded console, allegedly. So not much is known about the hardware specs, but just by virtue of it being able to output 4K suggests that there are improvements to the actual hardware, the physical hardware inside. So probably a slight processor upgrade and definitely a GPU upgrade. Now, even if and when this is released, it's still, don't expect a significant jump, in terms of like performance or true specs. Think of it more being akin to something of like the PlayStation 4 Pro and how that compares to the current PlayStation. That's what I am gathering from this. So I don't see it being even of significant jump of like the Xbox and the One X. So I think more on the lines of PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 4 Pro. And the other rumor that has been circulating a lot, recently, just like a couple of days now, that Assassin's Creed, the next Assassin's Creed game will be called Assassin's Creed Warriors. It should be coming out next year, so that's 2022, and it should be set in Japan. Not only that, it should be PS5 only or next gen only. So it will not be cross gen. So similar to like Assassin's Creed Black Flag, when that was released, it was cross gen at the time, and then they came out with, I think it was Unity, which was like a significant leap in terms of graphical fidelity. To this point, Unity still looks better than so many different Assassin's Creed games because they just went all out. The performance wasn't the best on consoles, but it was definitely a visual leap in terms of graphics. So I can't wait to see what the next Assassin's Creed games have to deliver graphically. And if this is true, we've seen now from Ghost of Tsushima that the whole Japan setting can be really interesting, really interesting, and just the whole picturesque nature of that country, how that can be like laid out as a wide canvas to us, the gamer, to just play around, mess around, take photos and stuff like that, and it's looking to be really interesting if this is actually the case, and it will shake up a lot of the whole stale formula that Assassin's Creed currently has going for it. Not the biggest Assassin's Creed fan, but this new setting and it being next gen only could definitely make me one. Again, before we get into the meat of the matter, So the PS5 is still outperforming the Series X in multi-platform games. It's been it's been around 5 or 6 months, between 4 to 6 months since the consoles have been out. And the latest tests from Digital Foundry. If you guys don't follow Digital Foundry, you should definitely be following Digital Foundry as gamers. It gives you significant breakdowns of visual, like graphics, graphical fidelity, and performance in games. And even if you're a PC gamer, it gives you a lot of suggestions on the best optimization settings for your games if you're having like difficulty trying to figure out what does what or getting smooth frame rates. Anyway, according to Digital Foundry, Outriders, which is this new game from People Can Fly, they had a demo recently, and it has been tested on all next-gen platforms. And the Series X is lagging behind the no pun intended, but lagging behind the PlayStation 5 in terms of performance. So the PS5 is holding a near stable 60 frames per second. It isn't constant, but it is pretty close to being constant. But on the Series X, there are a lot of just random frame drops, especially in like city hub zones. You're pretty much never getting 60. And even when you're getting 60, you're dropping down to the mid-50s a lot. So it's not stable, and it shouldn't be the case because they seem to be prioritizing resolution over performance, which is ridiculous. A lot of these games now use upscaling to achieve 4K. So all it takes, in my opinion, is just like lowering down. They use resolution scaling. So when something gets too intense, it drops the resolution so that you can have better performance. But the lower bounds of their resolution scaling is usually set higher than the PS5. And I think they just need to lower it to either 2 PS5 levels to have the same level performance, hopefully, or to just try and figure it out. It shouldn't be a recurring theme that the quote unquote most powerful console is constantly being left behind in terms of performance. It shouldn't be the case that it is lagging behind the PS5. I'm sure there's more that goes into creating games than just hardware specs. But it's not a one-off instance. Even recently, again, there has been Digital Foundry has also looked at the remastered version of Need for Speed. And again, it's behind. So on PS4, we have a completely locked 60 FPS. And this is an old game, mind you. And there are certain segments of particular tracks that just drop down to the low 40s on the Series X. So they haven't been having the smoothest of times, again, no pun intended, in figuring out these frame rate drops or performance issues. And it's been long enough for them to, at least for these older games, to be able to figure that stuff out by now. I'm a PS fanboy, so it's all good news to me. But overall, we want all gamers to be having at least quality performance gaming, right? Because trust me, I play Path of Exile, which is pretty shit in terms of performance. So I know the struggles of improper frame pacing and bad, just all out low frames per second, right? It's terrible. So I don't wish that on you Xbox fanboys, but it is what it is. And right now, that's just the nature of these two consoles. Now, getting into the main discussion point of the podcast this week is the PS5, well, not PS5, the PlayStation State of Play for 2021. Now, they recently held their game conference the State of Play event, which took place on February 25th. So this is just a few days behind Nintendo and their press conference. And to be honest, while I was not expecting much, again, just by us being in this particular time period, I know there's not a lot going on in gaming, but I was expecting a bit more than this. So what was announced was Crash Bandicoot 4, It's About Time. They had a deep dive on that. I wasn't necessarily interested in it at all. By the way, this is a game that already released on PS4, but it's coming to PlayStation 5. And I particularly have never been a Crash fan, but I can understand the nostalgia and the excitement or appeal that it will have for many. So they focused on the PS5 enhancements, typically 4K 60, improved audio and visuals, faster loading times, and just generally the typical stuff that comes with next-gen upgrade packages. So it's set to release on the 12th, and that's basically it. They're doing a next-gen upgrade for Crash Bandicoot 4, It's About Time. Next up, they had Returnal gameplay. So Returnal is this new game that's being developed by Housemarque. If you guys aren't familiar with who Housemarque is, they are the developers behind Resogun, which is like an arcade twin-stick shooter. And this game looks like it looks so strange. It looks like a mixture of arcade mixed with some elements of horror or Dark Souls type vibe. But then when like the enemies shoot out their weapons, it's just big arcade balls flying out. It just looks so fucking weird. I'm not entirely sure what to even think of this game. There are certain aspects of the visuals that look quite nice, and then at other times it just looks arcadey as fuck. But it exists, so there's that. Next up, at one point I was wondering if at some point during the presentation I accidentally swapped over to a Nintendo Direct stream, because there's this utterly ridiculous game being released called Knuckle City for PS4. And I'm guessing this game is entirely developed for 7-year-olds, because I'm not sure what's going on with this game. It is like a dodgeball battle royale type game with a shrinking arena. Who wants to be playing dodgeball? So it's like cartoony characters. Man, just watching this, I was just left feeling like, what the fuck did I actually just watch? It looks pretty bad. Typical Nintendo type kiddie stuff, but without the whole polish that a Nintendo game has, or any feeling of nostalgia. Something like a running series like Mario or Smash or anything like this. It's just this new random dodgeball shrinking arena game for PlayStation 4. Why? Nobody knows why. But somebody decided that was a good idea to make that game. And I'm not saying that all games need to be mature and stuff, because I do appreciate certain games that appeal to the younger audience, but this just seems so generic, right? It doesn't seem like it has anything behind it that has any real appeal to anyone, really. Like, who would want to play this? Hopefully this is a free PS Plus game and somebody will get interested in it. Next up, they had Solar Ash, which is coming to both PS5 and PS4. And this is a beautiful indie game focused on traversal and like fluid movement and combat. It has a Journey-esque art style. Journey is this indie game that even won Game of the Year a couple of years back for PS4. And Solar Ash actually does look super interesting. It doesn't have a defined release date, but it should be coming out later this year. So if you like artistic indie type games, then definitely keep an eye out for Solar Ash. Hopefully the gameplay and the game itself is very good, but from what has been shown so far, it's definitely one to watch for indie fans or just gamer fans overall. That's looking for something different outside of the whole typical AAA paint by number stuff. No, they also had some coverage of games which there's just no interest for these games. So there's Five Nights at Freddy's, no interest in that. Oddworld, I have no interest in that. It looks okay. It actually looks okay. Then Deathloop. No, Deathloop looks good if you're into that type of game. It had a very stylish new trailer. Yeah, so I've just never been interested in Deathloop at all since it was ever announced. So this trailer was not an announcement trailer. We've known about this game for some time now, but it just got a new trailer, a longer trailer, and it showed off a lot more gameplay stuff. Again, it looks good if you're interested in this particular type of game. It's like a stealthy BioShock type game. There's this one game that it reminds me a lot of, but for some reason the name escapes me now. I'm not even going to try too hard to even Google it because, again, not interested in this game. Now, the games that I am interested in that are either getting upgrades or coming out is, I've mentioned this previously, but Kina, Bridge of Spirits. It got a gorgeous new trailer that revealed a lot of additional story details. The price was also revealed, and it will be a $40 game. That's for the standard edition. So regardless of the platform that you're getting it on, so PS5 or PS4, it will be $40 just for the basic edition. And it's actually set to release August 24, which is great news because it gives people like me who still don't own a PS5 enough time to actually get one. So that is probably, the graphics, I've already spoken about this game. The graphics look amazing, and it's not a mature game, but it looks, almost looks like a Pixar movie, and it looks really good. Definitely picking this up once I get a PS5, and it's only $40, so not expensive at all. Not a AAA price, and I feel it's fair for a game of this nature because it doesn't seem, it doesn't appear to have like any multiplayer behind it or anything like that. Not that it needs it, it would probably ruin it, but I'm just saying the price tag is definitely justified for what it appears to be. And finally, we have Final Fantasy Remake.
Got it!
So Final Fantasy Remake Integrate for PS5. So this is just an upgrade to Final Fantasy Remake, which was released on PS4. So this is coming with additional enhancements. So that's 4K graphics mode and a 60 FPS performance mode. Naturally, it will have better graphics and performance, faster loading time, photo mode, stuff like that. But the kicker here is it comes with new content in the form of Yuffie. So if you guys ever played Final Fantasy VII before, you should know who Yuffie is. Or if you watched Final Fantasy, was she in Advent Children? I can't even remember. I think so. Yes, she was definitely in Advent Children. So if you're familiar with Final Fantasy Advent Children, or if you actually played Final Fantasy VII, you'll know who Yuffie is. I won't go into any detail about who she is, but it's a fun character. And she's getting her own little mini episode in this new remake integrate version for PS5. I'm not entirely sure if her story is coming to the existing PS4 version. It might be, But either way, you'd primarily be buying this for the PS5 upgrades and not necessarily just to pay a bit of money for the Yuffie episode, right? And this is set to release on June 10th. So, overall, what do I think about the conference? Underwhelming. To be quite frank, it was underwhelming, and this is coming from a PlayStation fan. Underwhelming, but understandable. Considering, again, as I've stated before many times, the time of year, and not only that, just the whole impact that the coronavirus pandemic has had on every single industry that exists on planet Earth. The majority of them, some industries have seen growth, but the majority of industry, especially large-scale industries like gaming and movies and certain productions, it has seen difficulty just staying afloat. So I don't expect too much from any developers at this point in time. But it's nice to see that they're still putting out these conferences and that some work is still being done on some games. And even though Final Fantasy already exists, it still looks good. Kina looks amazing. And there are a few other games there that some persons would find interesting. So, underwhelmed, but I appreciate the fact that they're still doing this. Oh, and I just remembered something. So, a couple podcasts ago, I had mentioned that Microsoft was actually having AI and gaming research summit, but it actually wasn't like an actual gaming presentation. So there wasn't anything of significance to actually be shown. It was more of a development conference, nothing that gaming enthusiasts would need to actually be aware of or even be able to understand. Yeah, so it's just a bunch of developer lingo, so that is why that was never covered, and the other actual conferences were. Anyway, that is what I thought of the PlayStation State of Play conference. That has been the latest that is still going on in the gaming industry. And that has been it for this week's episode of Aimbot Podcast. Keep gaming, stay safe out there, guys, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Cheers.